Trying to love somebody you never met. Loving him was red. Paint a smile on your lips. Blood red nails on your fingertips. You don't have to turn on the red light. Hello everybody, my name is Michael Knipp, and today we are talking about Red Seas Under Red Skies, the sequel to The Lies of Locke Lamora. I read The Lies of Locke Lamora back in 2019, I believe, and I loved it. It was a 5-star book. I called it a combination, a beautiful, wonderful, perfect combination of The Fast and the Furious, one of my favorite movie franchises of all time, and like a cruder Pirates of the Caribbean. And I loved the style that went on there. It was this sort of heisty thing, but there was all these levels. There were so many levels to the plot. And the characters I thought really worked. The story had me going one way and then it hard swerved, and I loved it, right? I loved that book. And then I never picked up the second one. I feel like there are a lot of people that have read The Lies of Locke Lamora that have not read Red Seas Under Red Skies. I don't think I'm the only one there. Hey, if you're with me, let me know in the comments down below. And while you're scrolling down, you could like the video if you'd like. Anyway, I finally took the plunge and I buddy read Red Seas Under Red Skies with Casey from Lost in a Bookcase, whose channel I will link below. By the way, the fact that I got through saying red so many times without having to do too many retakes, I'm pretty happy with myself. What is the best way to talk about the second book in a series without spoiling anything? I'll do my best. The first thing I will say is that this is a weaker entry than the first book. I believe that the first book, while it is long, has a really well-structured and well sort of thought-out plot where all of the elements sort of come together at the end and ahead the way that you would sort of expect from a book. Red Seas Under Red Skies, like its biggest problem in my opinion, is that there are so many things introduced that at least within this book, maybe it happens in the third book, there's just a lot of things that get introduced that don't resolve. And as I've talked about before, not everything that is placed in a book, especially a large fantasy book, like the readers of these types of books are more tolerant of this sort of thing. The problem is, I think that there are some interesting things they set up that don't go anywhere. I think there's a lot of hard swerving of the direction of where the story is going, not necessarily for the better. The book starts off and it really gets you invested in this A plot, and this is what is happening to these characters. And then it starts going wild, really fast, like immediately it goes bad. And around the 33% mark of the book, about a third of the way through the book, we are introduced to an entirely new plot unrelated to the plot we sort of got invested in the beginning. And that becomes the actual A plot. And so a lot of the setup from the beginning of the book really doesn't matter that much. I think the story does attempt to sort of tie everything together, but when you think about it, there's so many disparate elements of this original plot that sort of get thrown out the window, and there are so many little things that happen that don't have any actual substance in the narrative that's being told, that it starts to maybe feel like you were duped. And speaking of feeling like you were duped, I feel like once you have read the first book, you sort of have an expectation of the types of things that are going to be happening in this world. This book continues along with some of the threads that were introduced at the end of book 1. Unfortunately, those also sort of get weirdly weaved through this tangential second plot that gets introduced. And the problem is, if you were going to outline this book, it's going to be messy, and there are going to be parts that it's like, we probably should have chopped this part. But the problem is that Scott Lynch is very good about writing character dialogue, and he's really good about putting characters in interesting scenarios. And frankly, he does a killer job with world building in this Red Seas Under Red Skies. There are so many fascinating elements of the world that he introduces into the story. Unfortunately, they barely have anything to do with what's actually going on. And so we get a little tease and go, hey, what about this thing over here? This is really cool. Why don't you remember this? But also it's not important. And we're going to go do something else over here. And that's just such a departure, I feel like, from the structure of the original book, which has a lot of flashbacks that some people may not love as much, but it's not like they just lead nowhere. They are relevant to the character development, the story development, these frequently go nowhere. And so while I absolutely love the world building that's going on, and I sort of got invested right away into the plot, having that swerve, like having the carpet completely pulled out from under you, was weird. The other thing that I'm going to mention that I don't usually complain about, because depending on the story that you're reading, maybe it's relevant or maybe it's not. But the thing about Red Seas Under Red Skies is that probably 75% of this book, the main characters of the book have essentially no agency over the scenarios that they're put in. They are very much being swept along like this whitewater rapids crazy story of a plot, and you're there with them, and it is interesting. But when a lot of the draw of the story is your characters and their competency at a certain thing, and then that thing is completely taken away from them and they're sort of pushed down this weird avenue. It's weird for them. It's weird for the reader. I understand why a lot of people don't like this one as much. An element that Casey talks about in her review, I'll link that down below, and I think it is a relevant point for this discussion, is Scott Lynch used the opportunity of writing this book to introduce some characters into the story that were not previously there. It's part of the new plot that gets thrown in about a third of the way through the book. These new characters, they are awesome. I like them. They're very interesting. They have depth, and they sort of take over the story in a large way. Like, they become maybe more important than the protagonist, and they're not introduced until almost halfway through the book, when you're already sort of invested in this weird plot that gets thrown to the side, and then things change, and then these characters are introduced, and you're like, these are really awesome and interesting characters, but I kind of wanted to know what was going on with the characters of this series, like the main characters in the series. And I don't want to say there's nothing done with there, because there's movement there, but it is weird how much focus we get on these seemingly side characters that were just introduced halfway through the book, and they sort of usurp everything that we've done up to that point. And I realize that everything that I'm saying right now is really negative, but I didn't actually dislike this book a ton. I personally feel like it's more of a 4-star range book for me, because Scott Lynch's humor is excellent in this one. There is some awesome dialogue, banter, scenarios. I said that the world building, while it sort of gets laid aside, it's excellent. And there are so many times that I'm like, let's go down that path. I want to know what's going to happen down there. And there's enough information that you are given there that it's really, really gripping. We just don't always do that. The plot that we do go down is interesting. I sort of wish that somehow we had been given a scenario where our main characters continue to get to be as awesome as we sort of established in the first book. And it would be nice if we got to see them use the competencies that we know they have more often. They get to, right? They get to. This is a book about, I don't want to say the main character. This is a book about the main characters. And if you know who the main characters are at the end of the first book, this is about them. They do things. They do get to use their skills. But compared to the first book, that has been drastically toned down. As much as I sort of complained about the introduction of these new characters, they are awesome. We get to see some cool dynamics with them and the world building and the new story elements that are added in, and their relationship with the other main characters, right? It is good and it is interesting. It's just a little clunky. And then the other excellent element of this story that goes without saying, like, if you've heard about this series, you've probably heard about the relationship between certain main characters in the series having one of the best, like, bromances, like brotherly, like, I'll die for you, like, no matter what, you know, ride or die theory, you know, Fast and Furious. You get your Brian and Dom thing here. Come a long way from where we began, and I'll tell you all about it when I see you again. We get some excellent moments tied to that friendship in this one. So like I said before, for me, that is a solid 4-star rating because I very, very much enjoyed it. I just think that any criticism that I've seen of the book is pretty deserving because it really, really probably could have used an editor to structure the story in a more cohesive and sensical way, frankly. Nevertheless, I definitely am interested in continuing on and reading, what is it called? The Republic of Thieves, book 3 in this. The characters, right? The characters are excellent. Scott Lynch's writing is just, it's a blast. I'm curious, has anyone else out there read Red Seas Under Red Skies? What did you think about it compared to the original book? How do you feel about this series as a whole? If you haven't read The Lies of Locke Lamora, I strongly recommend that you read it if the way that I sort of described any of this sounds interesting to you, because it is an excellent book. And frankly, even if you don't want to continue along with the series, I think it does an awesome job at sort of being a standalone as well. Let me know your thoughts on my thoughts in the comments down below. Once again, if you like this video, please leave a thumbs up. If you'd like to see more from me in the future, please hit the subscribe button, hit the bell to get notifications of when I post new videos. If you'd like to chat about this or anything else, there is a link down below to my Discord. And if you'd like to support the channel financially, there's a link down below to a Patreon and also a store where I sell some dumb t-shirts and a decent mug. I'm looking forward to talking to you guys again soon. Hope to see you on the other side. Till next time, goodbye.
Sleep, no one ever get enough. Always looking out tired. Sleep, no one ever get enough. If I don't show up, I might get fired. Sleep, no one ever get enough. Always looking out tired. Sleep, no one ever get enough. If I don't show up, I might get fired.